The problem no species could solve. The barrier that stopped civilizations. For 3,000 years, the veil had been the edge of everything. It stretched across a region of space 10 light-years wide, a zone where the laws of physics twisted into something alien and hostile. Ships that entered the veil simply stopped working. Faster-than-light drives failed. Navigation systems went haywire. Energy shields collapsed. Even basic electronics malfunctioned in ways that made no sense. Every major civilization in the galaxy had tried to cross it. The ancient Caltharians, with their mastery of dimensional mathematics, had lost 50 research vessels before giving up. The Vryn Empire, whose military might was legendary, had sent an armada of 1,000 ships, only 17 made it back, their crews babbling about impossible geometries and spaces that folded back on themselves. The veil wasn't just dangerous. It was a wall that divided the galaxy in two. On one side was known space, where dozens of species traded, competed, and occasionally fought. On the other side were sensor readings that suggested hundreds of habitable worlds, resources beyond measure, and possibly other civilizations that had never been contacted. But no one could reach them. The veil made it impossible. Dr. Marcus Chin stood in the observation deck of the Galactic Research Station Kepler-7, staring at the swirling chaos of the veil through reinforced viewports. He was 42 years old, with graying hair and tired eyes that came from too many late nights in laboratories. Around him, representatives from a dozen species debated the same problem they'd been arguing about for decades. The energy fluctuations are too unpredictable, said Velthara, a Caltharian scientist whose crystalline body refracted the station's lights. Our most advanced quantum computers cannot model them accurately enough to chart a safe course. Force is the answer, growled Croft, a Vryn military commander who scaled hide-bore scars from 100 battles. We send enough ships, some will make it through. We tried that, Velthara replied coldly. Your people lost 983 ships in the attempt. How many more are you willing to sacrifice? Marcus listened to them argue, his mind elsewhere. He'd been studying the veil for 3 years now, ever since Earth had been invited to join the Galactic Research Initiative. Humanity was the newest member of galactic civilization, they'd only achieved faster-than-light travel 20 years ago. Most species viewed humans as interesting but ultimately minor players in galactic affairs. Which was probably why no one was listening to his theory. The human approach. What if we're thinking about this wrong? Marcus said quietly. The room fell silent. A dozen alien eyes turned toward him with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed condescension. Explain, Velthara said. Marcus pulled up a holographic display, showing the energy patterns within the veil. Every species that's tried to cross has used the same basic approach: force your way through with powerful shields and hope your technology can withstand the chaos. But what if that's the problem? What if the veil responds to energy by becoming more chaotic? That's not how physics works, said Talvin, a Centauri engineer whose 4 arms gestured dismissively. Energy is energy. The veil is just a region of extreme spatial distortion. Except it's not, Marcus countered. Look at these readings. He highlighted patterns in the data. The more energy you pump into the veil, the more violently it reacts. It's almost like it's defending itself. But these areas here, he pointed to several spots where the chaos was less intense, these are regions where natural phenomena with minimal energy signatures pass through relatively undisturbed. Natural phenomena like what? Croft demanded. Comets. Asteroids. Space dust. Things that don't generate artificial energy signatures. The room erupted in scoffs and dismissive gestures. Velthara's crystalline form chimed with what Marcus had learned was laughter. You're suggesting we cross the veil in unpowered vessels? That's suicide. How would we navigate? How would we survive? I'm suggesting we think smaller. Use minimal power. Go slow instead of forcing our way through fast. Work with the veil instead of fighting it. Humans, Talvin said with a shake of his primary head, have a reputation for creative thinking. But this is beyond creative. This is foolish. The veil has stood for millennia. Your species has been in space for barely 2 decades. Perhaps leave the problem to those with more experience. Marcus felt his face flush with embarrassment, but he stood his ground. Maybe that's exactly why we might solve it. We don't have 3,000 years of failed attempts telling us it's impossible. The unauthorized experiment. The meeting ended with Marcus's theory being officially dismissed as interesting but impractical. The Galactic Council allocated another 1 trillion credits to building bigger, more powerful ships for another crossing attempt. But Marcus couldn't let it go. That night, in his quarters aboard Kepler-7, he ran simulations over and over. Every model he built showed the same thing: minimal energy signatures had the highest probability of crossing successfully. He pulled up a communication channel to Earth. The face that appeared on his screen belonged to his old friend and former colleague, Dr. Sarah Martinez. "Marcus, it's 3 in the morning here," she said, rubbing her eyes. "This better be important." "I need access to the Endeavour," Marcus said without preamble. The Endeavour was humanity's first deep space exploration vessel, now retired and in storage at Earth's orbital shipyard. It was small, old-fashioned by galactic standards, and powered by a hybrid system that combined human fusion technology with basic alien FTL drives. "Why?" Sarah asked, suddenly more awake. "Because I'm going to cross the veil." There was a long silence. Then Sarah said, "They dismissed your theory." "They dismissed it without testing it." "Sarah, I'm right about this." "I can feel it. But no one will authorize an official mission because they think it's too risky. So I'm going unofficial." "Marcus, that's career suicide." "Maybe actual suicide if you're wrong. If I'm right, I'll open up half the galaxy. If I'm wrong, well, at least I tried." Sarah studied his face through the video link. They'd been friends since university, had worked together on Earth's first FTL project. She knew him well enough to see that he'd already made his decision. "You'll need a crew," she finally said. "The Endeavour requires at least 3 people to operate safely." "I was hoping to go alone. Less risk to others." "And who's going to run engineering while you're piloting through the most dangerous region of space known to exist?" "I'll come. And we'll need at least 1 more person." "Sarah, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Because you're my friend and you're probably right, and someone needs to make sure you don't do something stupid." She smiled. "Well, stupider than what you're already planning." By the end of the week, they had their crew. Sarah Martinez as chief engineer. James Park, a Korean-American pilot who'd flown rescue missions in the asteroid belt and had nerves of steel. And Marcus as mission commander and chief scientist. They also had the Endeavour, requisitioned through channels that were technically legal but morally questionable. Earth's government had quietly approved the mission. If Marcus succeeded, humanity would get credit for solving the unsolvable problem. If he failed, Earth would claim he'd gone rogue. Politics, Marcus thought bitterly, worked the same way everywhere in the galaxy. The journey begins. The Endeavour departed from Earth orbit on a Tuesday morning. Marcus watched his home planet shrink in the viewports, wondering if he'd ever see it again. The journey to the Veil would take 3 weeks even at FTL speeds. They spent the time preparing. Marcus refined his calculations, searching for the optimal entry point into the Veil. Sarah worked on the ship's systems, configuring everything to run on minimal power. James practiced navigation using only basic sensors and manual controls. If Marcus was right, they'd have to fly through the Veil almost blind. "You know the galactic community is going to be furious," James said one evening as they shared dinner in the ship's small common area. "We didn't exactly ask permission." "We asked," Marcus replied. "They said no." "There's a difference." "A technical difference," Sarah pointed out. "But yes, they're going to be angry. Assuming we survive to face their anger." "When we survive," Marcus corrected. "I didn't come this far to fail." "That's what they all say," James muttered, but he was smiling. The Endeavour dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Veil 3 weeks later. Through the viewports, the region looked like a storm frozen in space, clouds of dark matter swirling around pockets of impossible color, lightning that moved in slow motion, and stars that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. "Okay," James said quietly. "That's terrifying." "Energy readings are off the charts," Sarah reported from engineering. "Spatial distortions detected across the entire region." "Marcus, are you absolutely sure about this?" Marcus stared at the veil, feeling the weight of the decision. If he was wrong, 3 people would die and humanity would be humiliated. If he was right, everything changed. "I'm sure," he said. "Sarah, power down everything except life support and minimal thrusters. James, prepare for manual navigation. We're going in slow and quiet." Into the storm. They approached the veil at a crawl, barely faster than a spacewalk. The Endeavour coasted on momentum more than thrust, its systems running at the bare minimum needed to keep the crew alive. As they crossed the boundary, Marcus felt the ship shudder. Alarms began to sound, then fell silent as Sarah shut them off to conserve power. Entering the veil, James announced, his hand steady on the manual controls. "I've got minimal sensor contact. Flying almost blind here." "That's good," Marcus said, watching his instruments. The energy fluctuations that had torn apart other ships were still there, but they were flowing around the Endeavour like water around a stone. "The veil's not reacting to us. We're too small, too quiet. Keep going." Hours passed. The journey through the veil that would have taken minutes at normal speed stretched into an ordeal of patient, careful navigation. James flew by instinct as much as instruments, feeling his way through spaces that twisted and turned. "We've got a problem," Sarah called from engineering. "Life support is draining power faster than expected. The veil's affecting our systems even at minimal power. We've got maybe 10 hours of air left at this rate." Marcus checked their progress. They were halfway through. "Can we make it? If nothing else goes wrong and we don't slow down." "So basically, no guarantees." "Story of this whole mission," James muttered. They pressed on. The veil seemed to sense them now, currents of impossible energy flowing closer, testing their shields like curious fingers. But Marcus's theory held, the minimal energy signature kept them from triggering the violent reactions that had destroyed other ships. 8 hours in, James reported, "I see something. Clear space ahead. I think we're almost through." "Don't celebrate yet," Sarah warned. "Life support is down to fumes. We've got maybe an hour left." "Then we better not waste it," Marcus said. "James, full speed ahead. Whatever power we've got left, use it. Let's get out of here." The Endeavour surged forward, its engines roaring to life for the first time since entering the veil. The boundary between chaos and normal space appeared ahead of them like a curtain of light. They burst through into clear space with alarms screaming and life support failing and hearts pounding with the knowledge of how close they'd come to dying. But they'd made it. They'd crossed the veil. And on the other side, their sensors immediately lit up with readings of planets, resources, and most incredibly, what looked like artificial structures, signs of civilizations that had been cut off from the rest of the galaxy for 3,000 years. "Holy!" James breathed, staring at the display. Marcus smiled, exhaustion and triumph mixing in equal measure. "Told you it would work." The discovery that changed everything. First contact on the other side. The first thing they discovered on the far side of the veil was a signal. Not a distress call, not a greeting, just a steady pulse of information broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Sarah managed to boost their receiver enough to capture it. "It's a beacon," she said, studying the data. "Automated, probably been running for centuries. The language is, wait, I'm getting translation software to work on it." Marcus and James crowded around her station as the computer slowly decoded the alien message. When the translation appeared on screen, all 3 of them fell silent. "Attention all vessels. You have entered the combined territories. Hostile approach will be met with defensive action. Peaceful visitors should proceed to coordinates XXYYZZ for formal contact protocols. Combined territories? James said. There's more than one civilization here? Makes sense, Marcus replied. If the Veil's been impassable for 3,000 years, any species on this side would have had all that time to develop, expand, and either fight each other or learn to cooperate. The coordinates are in a system 2 light-years from here, Sarah reported. We've got enough power to make one FTL jump, but after that we'll need to refuel or we're stuck. Marcus made the decision. Set course. We came here to make contact. Let's not waste the opportunity. The Endeavour jumped to the designated coordinates and found itself approaching a massive space station unlike anything in known galactic architecture. It was beautiful in an organic way, like a flower made of metal and crystal, with hundreds of ships of various designs docked at its petals. We're being scanned, James reported. Multiple targeting locks. They're not taking chances. A communication came through. The face that appeared on screen was humanoid but definitely not human, gray skin, large eyes, 3 fingers on each hand. When it spoke, the translation software kicked in immediately. Unknown vessel, you have entered combined territory space through the veil barrier. This should not be possible. Explain your presence and capabilities immediately or be considered hostile. Marcus stepped forward, keying his own communicator. This is Dr. Marcus Chen of the human vessel Endeavour. We're explorers from the other side of the veil. We mean no harm. We just wanted to see what was on this side. There was a long pause. Then, you crossed the veil intentionally? How? Every attempt for 3,000 years has failed. We used minimal power and patience instead of force, Marcus explained. Worked with the veil instead of fighting it. Another long pause. Then the alien's expression shifted to something that might have been amazement. You will dock at port 17. Do not deviate from the designated course. We have many questions. The story they told. The alien who met them at the docking port introduced himself as Ambassador Kelvin of the Thrace Collective. He led them through the station's corridors, which were bustling with dozens of different species. The combined territories, Kelvin explained as they walked, consists of 47 species who live on this side of the veil. For 3,000 years, we've been isolated from the rest of the galaxy. We've built our own civilization, our own alliances. And we've tried desperately to find a way back across. Back across? Sarah asked. You mean you didn't originate here? Kelvin led them into a conference room where holographic displays showed star maps and historical data. 3,000 years ago, the veil appeared suddenly. We don't know why or how. It cut our colonies off from our homeworlds. Families were separated. Trade routes were severed. Some species found themselves split in 2, half on each side of the barrier. He pulled up images of ancient ships trying to cross the veil. We tried everything. Lost millions of people in the attempts. Eventually, we gave up. We assumed the other side had also given up trying to reach us. We've been alone for so long that some of our younger generations don't even believe the other side still exists. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The other side hasn't forgotten. There are species there who lost colonies and people when the veil appeared. They've been trying to cross too. And you're the first to succeed, Kelvin said, studying them with new interest. Humans, you said? We have no records of your species. You must be new to space travel. 20 years, James confirmed. We're the new kids on the galactic block. Kelvin made a sound that might have been laughter. And the newest species solved a problem that stumped us for 3 millennia. The irony is beautiful. The knowledge exchange. Over the next week, the Endeavour's crew shared everything they knew about the crossing. Marcus provided his detailed calculations and theory. Sarah gave them specifications on the ship's minimal power configuration. James walked their navigators through the manual flying techniques he'd used. In return, the combined territories shared their own knowledge. 3,000 years of isolation had led to fascinating developments. They'd found alternatives to technologies that known space used. They'd developed different approaches to problems. They'd even made discoveries in physics that Marcus found revolutionary. Your species, Kelvin said during one late-night discussion, has a unique perspective. You haven't been in space long enough to develop rigid thinking. You don't have 3,000 years of this is how it's always been done weighing down your innovation. That's what I tried to tell the Galactic Research Council, Marcus said wryly. They weren't impressed. They will be now. When you return and tell them what you've found, everything changes. The veil can be crossed. The two halves of the galaxy can be reunited. Trade, knowledge, families separated for millennia, all can be restored. If we can return, Sarah pointed out. We barely made it across the first time and our ship's in rough shape. Kelvin smiled. We'll help you. The Thrace Collective has the best shipwrights in the combined territories. We'll repair your vessel and provide supplies for the journey back. More than that, we'll send ambassadors with you. It's time for the galaxy to become whole again. The journey home. 2 weeks later, the Endeavour departed from the Combined Territories station. The ship had been repaired and upgraded with new technology that blended both sides of the galaxy's innovations. More importantly, they carried 3 ambassadors from different Combined Territories species, along with detailed star charts, cultural databases, and messages for long-lost colonies. The return journey through the Veil was easier now that they knew the route. James flew with confidence, Sarah kept the systems stable, and Marcus spent his time talking with the ambassadors, learning about their cultures and histories. What do you think will happen? One of the ambassadors, a being named Sora from a species called the Luminari, asked as they approached the far side of the Veil. When we arrive? When your galaxy learns about us? Marcus thought carefully. Honestly? Chaos at first. Joy for some, species who'll learn their lost colony survived. Confusion for others. Maybe fear from a few who'll worry about competition or security. But mostly, hope. Hope that the impossible can become possible. That barriers can be overcome. That we're all stronger together than apart. That's very optimistic, Sora observed. That's very human, Sarah said with a smile. We're good at optimism. Probably because we haven't been disappointed as often as older species. They burst through the veil back into known space. Immediately, alarms started sounding as galactic patrol ships detected them and began approaching at high speed. Unknown vessel, identify yourself immediately. You are in violation of Veil proximity protocols. Marcus opened a channel to every ship, station, and relay in range. This is Dr. Marcus Chen of the human vessel Endeavour. We have successfully crossed the Veil and returned. We bring ambassadors from 47 species who have been isolated for 3,000 years. The Veil can be crossed. The galaxy can be reunited. And we're ready to show you how. The aftermath. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, ships from a dozen species were surrounding the Endeavour, some demanding proof, others offering protection, all desperate for information. The Galactic Council called an emergency session at Kepler 7 station. Marcus, Sarah, and James stood before the same council that had dismissed his theory weeks ago. Now they stared at the 3 alien ambassadors standing beside the humans with expressions of shock and awe. Delthara spoke first, her crystalline form chiming with emotion. You actually did it. You crossed the Veil. How? We listened to a human scientist you dismissed as inexperienced, Ambassador Sora said calmly. We listened because we had nothing to lose. Perhaps that's a lesson worth learning. Croth, the VRYNN military commander, stepped forward. The species on the other side of the Veil, are they hostile? Should we prepare for conflict? They're desperate for reunion, Ambassador Kelvin replied. Many have lost colonies and loved ones. They want peace, trade, and reconnection. But they're also prepared to defend themselves if they must. The choice is yours, approach with open hands or closed fists. The council chambers erupted in discussion. Some species were ecstatic, their lost colonies had survived. Others were worried about the political implications. A few were already calculating economic advantages. Through it all, Marcus stood quietly, watching humanity's first major contribution to galactic civilization unfold. They hadn't built the fastest ships or the strongest weapons. They hadn't mastered ancient technologies or conquered new worlds. They'd simply looked at an old problem from a new angle and refused to accept that impossible meant don't try. Later, after the formal meetings ended, Delthara approached Marcus privately. "I owe you an apology," she said. "We dismissed your idea because of your species youth. We were wrong." "You were scared," Marcus replied gently. "The veil has stood for 3,000 years. It killed millions trying to cross it. Being cautious made sense. Perhaps. But caution without innovation is just stagnation. Your species taught us that today." Marcus smiled. "Don't give us too much credit. We just tried something no one else had tried. Sometimes being new means you don't know what's supposed to be impossible. And sometimes," Delthara said, "that's exactly what the galaxy needs." 6 months later. The first convoy of ships crossed the Veil 6 months after the Endeavor's return. They used Marcus's minimal power technique, traveling in groups for safety but each ship maintaining the low-energy signature that allowed safe passage. Marcus watched from Kepler 7 as dozens of vessels made the crossing in both directions. Families reunited after generations of separation. Trade agreements were signed between species who'd never met. Cultural exchanges began. The Veil, which had divided the galaxy for 3 millennia, was becoming a bridge instead of a barrier. "You started something incredible," Sarah said, standing beside him at the observation window. "We started it together," Marcus corrected. "You, me, James. We were a team. A team that the galaxy didn't believe in. Which is exactly why we succeeded. No one told us we couldn't, so we just did it." On the viewport, another ship was preparing to make the crossing. This one was special, a diplomatic vessel carrying ambassadors from both sides of the Veil to a joint conference where the newly reunited species would discuss their shared future. And aboard that vessel, as part of humanity's delegation, were Dr. Marcus Chen and his crew. Earth's government had appointed them as official ambassadors, recognizing that they'd done more than solve a scientific problem. They'd proven that humanity belonged among the stars, not because they were strongest or oldest or most advanced, but because they brought something unique to the galactic community, the willingness to try the impossible. As the diplomatic vessel entered the Veil, Marcus felt the familiar shudder of crossing between realities. But this time, he wasn't afraid. He knew the route. He knew the technique. And he knew that on the other side, an entire half of the galaxy was waiting to welcome them home. The barrier that had stood for 3,000 years was finally, permanently, open. And it had taken humanity, the youngest species in the galaxy, the newcomers who didn't know any better, to show everyone else how. "You know what the funny thing is?" James said from the pilot's seat. "We're going to be doing this run hundreds of times now. The crossing everyone said was impossible is going to become a routine milk run." "That's how progress works," Marcus replied. "Today's miracle becomes tomorrow's mundane. But we'll always remember what it took to get here." "And what's that?" Sarah asked. Marcus looked out at the swirling chaos of the Veil, which no longer seemed quite so threatening now that they understood it. Courage to try. Willingness to think differently. And a little bit of stubborn human refusal to accept no for an answer. The ship emerged on the other side of the Veil into clear space. Ahead of them, the lights of the Combined Territories station gleamed like a promise. Behind them, the route back home lay open and safe. The impossible had become possible. The divided had become whole. And humanity had proven what they could contribute to the galaxy, not better weapons or faster ships, but fresh perspectives and the audacity to challenge the word impossible. In the end, that was the most human thing of all.